What's going on, guys? It's the Skylander dude back here with another video. We got another episode of creating unreleased Skylanders. In this episode, of course, we have Heartbreaker Buckshot, probably the most infamous unreleased figure. So let's just hop right into this custom. So to start off the custom here, I grabbed the heat gun and started to slightly heat up the figure just to make it a little wobbly. You don't want to keep it on the figure for too long because it will actually start to melt the figure, which I found out the hard way later. But I started with the arrow here, separating it from the bow because that's the most fragile part of the entire figure. That's a very thin connection there. Then I went from taking things off the base, starting with the legs and the end of the bow, and then separated the tail from the back to take it completely off the base. Then I heated up the waist and twisted that off as well. Then I heated up the arms to take those off. I heated up the hand as well to just take out the bow, and then went in and took out the arm as well. And then I went back into the arm that I took off first to get that bow out of the hand. That was pretty easy, just had to pull that out basically. And then I hit it with the heat gun just so it'll get a little loose, and then I can hold it tight so when it hardens, it'll be nice and straight. And then here are all the pieces. We got the base there, we got the Buckshot torso and head, and the legs, which I was able to just take off the Sensei built similar to the Starcast actually. Then we got one of the hands that had the arrow in it, the other hand that had the bow itself, and the arrow. Then we started to paint. Started with the white here, thinned it out a little bit, mixed it up with a little bit of water, and I used some tape just to tape onto the armor of the hand just to give me a handle when everything is all painted white, because this whole arm is going to be painted white here except for the fingers, and then in the middle where I put that tape won't be white. So you see it going on pretty thin here with the first coat, but then after maybe I'd say I think 5 or 6 more coats, it was a pretty solid white. This is the final coat of white for the hand. Then I moved on to the next one, doing the same thing with the blue tape, taping it on the armor and putting a binder clip there so I can just hold it and suspend it in the air while it's drying. Again, with the white, doing a thin coat with a little bit of water to thin it out to keep the brush strokes from showing as much. And then after another 5 or 6 coats, here is the final coat of white for the other arm. Then I went to the legs next, taping it off at the hooves of Buckshot and then painting just the pants white. The legs themselves will be pink, so I just need to paint those black pants there, and black to white is probably the hardest transition. So this took quite a few more coats, I think 7 or 8 to get it nice solid white. And then 7 or 8 coats later, you can see the solid white pants looking pretty good. Then I moved on to the head and torso of Buckshot, taping it at the hooves because that would be the very last part that I paint. And it also gives me a pretty good place to hold on to. Starting off with the pink, and you'll see here that this pink looks pretty good, but after it dried, it actually was a little too pink, so I added some white in the later coats to make it sort of a lighter pink than this more darker pink. It's not really dark pink, but it's just more pink. I don't know how else to say it. And then I was doing some work off camera with the base because as I was taking Buckshot off, I nicked the sides a little bit, tried to repair it with some clay, but I left it in the oven too long to bake the clay and it was just completely warped and destroyed. The tail came off though, but I wasn't going to end up using it. Luckily, I did have a second extra Buckshot figure, and I was much more careful taking that figure off its base, making sure not to mess up the base at all. It was very clean. You can see here how neat this one is compared to the last one, and also the tail came off pretty nicely, so I decided to use that tail instead of the other one, and I would just plug the peg into the body that I had. So I attached some tape to the part of the tail that we plugged into the body. You wouldn't see it, and I painted the rest that pink. Again, later I would decide to add more white to the pink, but that's how it was. And then I went into the fingers. All the fur on Heartbreaker Buckshot is pink. So I painted both sets of fingers on each of the hands. Then I took off the tape from the pants and repositioned it towards the top of the white that was already finished. And I started to paint the fur on the legs, the pink as well. Now the pink wasn't too bad. It was just almost as thin as the white because it was such a light color. So I would say it maybe only took 5 or 6 coats. Again, it was light pink onto a white, so it's pretty easy to cover up. Then going back in for the final coat here, you can see the batch of pink that I mixed up in a bottle cap down there. It was a little bit of white and mostly pink, but it ended up being pretty accurate to the Heartbreaker Buckshot pink that was used in the figure, or at least from the photos that I had for reference. I used the photos from the seller that had them listed on eBay for auction until that got taken down. Because those are probably the only good pictures we have of the actual figure in hand. So I used those. It may not have been the best lighting, so the pink might be slightly off, but it's not going to be too drastically different. Went in with the white for the face of Heartbreaker Buckshot. I had to be very careful to paint nice smooth lines because I wanted to make it look like it was factory painted, not painted by hand. So I wanted to make them nice and smooth, making them hard edges. Painted the ears as well. The ears are also white. And I painted the satchel or belt or whatever you want to call it that's connected to the shoulder pad on Heartbreaker Buckshot's chest. Then I mixed in some red and some brown for the hooves. It was this very weird red-brown color, and it looks pretty weird when it's first getting painted on, but once it dries, it looks pretty accurate to the hooves on the figure. And I used that same color to paint in the nose with just a toothpick to make sure that I didn't paint on too much. Then once all those pieces have dried, I took off the paint to paint on this sort of pink red color. This first coat that I did was completely off. The color was not even close. A lot of this is just color correcting to make it as accurate to the figure as possible. But I thought this fuchsia was pretty good, and then after it dried, I looked back and it was terrible. So I mixed up a new color for that as well. So this was the color that I mixed up here. It looks a little bit more red on camera than it actually is, but I mixed some red, some pink, some of that fuchsia, and a little bit of white as well. I mixed a lot of colors and just adding a little bit by bit to get it that perfect color, as accurate as I could. And here's the final go with it. Again, it looks a little red. It's not that red in person, but it still looks pretty good to the actual figure. And then the most tedious part of this custom was painting these eyes red. I wanted to make it as smooth as I could, making the lines as crisp as possible. I did a pretty good job. There's some spots that I tried again to go back and make them smoother, but it was just the best that I could do. And then I used some of that pearlizing medium and mixed it with the white to do exactly what you'd think it would do. It would make the white a nice pearl color. There's pearl white and pearl pink on the figure, so the horns are a nice pearl white. And then I mixed up a batch of pearl pink, using some pink, some white, and that pearlescent medium as well to get that same pink color that I used for the rest of the body, but as a pearl color. And I used it for the bow there, taping it off right at the connection point between the palm of the hand and the bow. Painting it on, it didn't really stick very well to that metallic gold, but with a few more coats, it did end up looking pretty good. And I also used that pearl pink on the accents on his hands there. Again, also being pretty tedious with making those lines nice and crisp. And as you can see here with these final coats of the pearl pink, looks pretty good, shines pretty nicely in the light. Can't really tell too much on camera, but it does look pretty good, and I'd imagine it looks exactly as the Heartbreaker Buckshot figure would with that pearl color in the same spots. And then it was time to make the red translucent arrow, changing it from translucent purple to translucent red. And to do this, I used some synthetic red dye. I believe this is meant for fabric, but it works pretty well. I tested it here on a few traps, and I left the magic log holder in a bit too long, so then I did a better job with the air jug head. So basically, I attached some wire to the arrow to sort of suspend it in the air, not let it touch the bottom so it wouldn't melt. Just basically so I can sort of have the arrow hover there in the pot. And that is water mixed with a few drops of the red dye, and putting the lid on there, just sort of let it sit. And I'm not speeding this up at all. This is how fast it really was. It only takes a few seconds. So then I pick it up to check on it, and of course my hand was covering it so you couldn't see, but it was a bit too purple. I wanted to leave it in there just for a little longer, but I don't want to leave it in too long because I can't go back. I can only make it more red. I can't make it less red. And then you can see it here when I take it out, still a little bit more longer. Put it in for just a few more seconds, and then I'll take it out and rinse it off in cool water to make sure the dye stays on that figure. And then here is how it turned out. Turned out pretty good, I think. Looks completely translucent red as if it was from an official figure. But now that every separate piece was finished, it was time to glue it all together to have the finished custom in one piece. This custom did take me quite a long time, but I wanted it to look as perfect as I could get it, make it look like the official Heartbreaker Buckshot figure, and I think I did just that. I think the paint job is probably one of the best I've done on any other custom that I have. And then here is the final piece, the translucent red arrow, gluing it in. And now introducing the finished Heartbreaker Buckshot custom. Let me know in the comments how this turned out and what I should work on next in this Creating Unreleased Skylanders series. But with that, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Peace.